I never thought I'd be the kind of man who checks his bank account 3 times in a row, hoping the numbers would somehow change. But there I was, staring at my phone at 2:37 a.m., the harsh blue light illuminating my face in the darkness of our bedroom, while Rebecca slept peacefully beside me. The balance was still the same, a $1044.13. Yesterday it had been $347,926.78, $347,000, gone, transferred out in a single transaction while I was in Seattle closing the biggest architectural project of my career. I felt my stomach twist as I looked over at my wife of 8 years, her chest rising and falling steadily, completely unaware that I had discovered what she'd done. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Or so I thought. I couldn't have imagined then that this betrayal was just the beginning, or that a forgotten clause in a document I'd signed years ago would eventually be my salvation. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., and I reached over to silence it before it could wake Rebecca. Not that it would have mattered. She could sleep through a tornado. I'd always envied that about her. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb the mattress too much, and padded to the bathroom to start my morning routine. Steam filled the shower as I stood under the hot water, trying to clear my head. I still hadn't confronted Rebecca about the money. Part of me hoped there was some explanation, some massive bank error that would be sorted out with a phone call. The rational part of me knew better, but I wasn't ready to face what this meant for us, for our life together. Our home in Portland's West Hills neighborhood was everything we'd dreamed of when we first got married. 4 bedrooms, a dedicated office space for each of us, and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the spectacular view of Mount Hood in the distance. I'd designed it myself, my first major solo project after making partner at Westlake Architectural Group. Rebecca had been by my side through every step of the process, choosing finishes, arguing playfully about the kitchen layout, insisting on the oversized soaking tub that now dominated our master bathroom. As I toweled off and dressed, I could hear Rebecca stirring in the bedroom. She appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair tousled from sleep, wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. "Morning," she mumbled, reaching past me for her toothbrush. "You're up early." "Big presentation today," I replied, adjusting my tie in the mirror. "The riverfront project final approval," she nodded, squeezing toothpaste onto her brush. "You'll nail it. You always do." There was something in her tone, a flatness, a detachment, that I might not have noticed if I hadn't seen our bank account. Or maybe I was projecting, searching for signs that something was off. "I might be home late," I said, watching her reflection in the mirror. "Don't wait up." "I won't," she replied easily. "I've got that fundraiser dinner for the art museum tonight, remember?" I had forgotten, actually. Rebecca served on several non-profit boards, a role she'd taken on after scaling back her own career as a marketing executive 3 years ago. She'd claimed she wanted more balance, more time for us, but lately her calendar seemed fuller than ever. "Right, the fundraiser," I said. "Who's chairing it again?" "Jason Morales," she answered, "from the Museum Foundation." I nodded, not recognizing the name. There were so many people in Rebecca's social circles now, faces that blurred together. At events I attended reluctantly. Downstairs, I made coffee and assembled a quick breakfast while checking emails on my phone. Rebecca joined me 20 minutes later, now dressed in yoga pants and a fitted top, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Are you still meeting Olivia for lunch today?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Olivia Kim was our financial advisor, a brilliant woman who had helped us navigate investments and retirement planning for the past 5 years. I had, in fact, scheduled an emergency meeting with her for noon, but I hadn't told Rebecca about it. "How did you know about that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Rebecca shrugged. I saw it on the shared calendar. Of course, our digital lives were intertwined in countless ways. Calendars, accounts, passwords. It had never occurred to me until now how vulnerable that made me. Just a routine check-in, I lied. The riverfront payment came through, so I want to discuss investment options. Smart, she said, not meeting my eyes. That's a substantial commission. It was nearly $200,000 for my firm, with a significant percentage allocated to me as the lead architect. Money that was supposed to be in our joint account, alongside our existing savings. Money that was now gone. I finished my coffee in silence, the weight of the unspoken truth hanging between us. How had we arrived here? Two people sharing a kitchen but existing in completely different realities? I should go, I said finally, gathering my things. Traffic will be brutal if I wait any longer. Rebecca nodded, still focused on her phone. Good luck with the presentation. I hesitated in the doorway, studying her. At 41, Rebecca was still strikingly beautiful. The same high cheekbones and clear blue eyes that had caught my attention at a friend's wedding 11 years ago. But there was something different about her lately. A guardedness that had crept in so gradually I couldn't pinpoint when it had started. Rebecca, I said, my voice catching. Is everything okay? With us, I mean. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? You just seem distant lately. Her expression softened, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with. I'm fine, Michael. Just stressed about the fundraiser. We're still short of our goal. I nodded, not pushing further. I'll see you tonight, maybe. If not, tomorrow morning. Drive safe, she said, already looking back at her phone. The drive to downtown Portland gave me time to think. Rebecca and I had met when we were both 30, me, an ambitious architect working my way up at a prestigious firm, her, already a marketing director at a national sportswear company. Our courtship had been swift and certain, a meeting of equals with compatible dreams. We'd married within a year. Bought our first home together and settled into what I'd thought was a solid partnership. We'd agreed to delay having children until our careers were established. But as the years passed, the conversation came up less and less frequently. Now, at 42, I sometimes found myself watching young families in parks with a pang of something like regret. Had we waited too long? Had we been so focused on building our perfect life that we'd forgotten to actually live it? My office at Westlake Architectural Group occupied a corner of our firm's 12th floor space, with views of the Willamette River and the city skyline. My assistant, Emily Zhang, was already at her desk when I arrived, a stack of presentation materials neatly arranged. "Morning, Michael," she said, handing me a more substantial coffee than the one I'd made at home. "The team's already in the conference room, running through the riverfront slides one last time. The clients arrive at 10. Emily had joined the firm 4 years ago, fresh out of Portland State with a business degree. At 26, she managed my professional life with an efficiency that sometimes bordered on scary. She knew my preferences, anticipated problems before they arose, and had saved me from countless scheduling conflicts. "Thanks," I said, taking the coffee. "Before I join them, I need you to do something for me. It's personal, and I'd appreciate discretion." Emily straightened, her expression turning serious. "Of course. I need to know if there's a way to see what wire transfers went out of my personal account yesterday. The online banking shows a withdrawal, but I need details." She hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "That's normally something you'd need to contact your bank about directly. Is everything okay?" "Just a discrepancy I need to clear up," I said, knowing my attempt at casualness wasn't fooling her. Emily was too perceptive. "I can make some calls." "For you," she offered. "I still have a friend in the wealth management department at First Republic from my internship there." "That would be helpful, thank you." I handed her a piece of paper with my account number. Again, I'd appreciate keeping this between us. She nodded, taking the paper. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I understand. I'll see what I can find out discreetly. The morning proceeded, in a blur of client meetings and presentation rehearsals. The Riverfront project was a $120 million mixed-use development that would transform an aging industrial area into a vibrant community hub, the kind of legacy project architects dream about. Under normal circumstances, I would have been fully immersed in the details, energized by the culmination of 3 years of work. Instead, I found myself checking my phone at every opportunity, waiting for messages from Emily or Olivia. The numbers kept flashing in my mind. 347, 926, and 78 to 842, 13, a decimation of our financial security in a single transaction. At 11:30, Emily appeared in the doorway of the conference room, catching my eye. I excused myself from the team and followed her to a quiet corner. "I spoke with my contact," she said quietly. "The transfer went out yesterday at 1:14 p.m. while you were still in Seattle. It was authorized online using correct credentials and security protocols." My heart sank. Where did the money go? To a business account at Pacific Northwest Bank under the name Meridian Ventures, LLC. It's a recently established account opened about 3 months ago. Meridian Ventures. The name meant nothing to me. Is there any way to find out who owns this LLC? Emily hesitated. My contact couldn't access that information easily, but she lowered her voice further. I took the liberty of doing some basic research. Meridian Ventures LLC was registered in Oregon in January. The registered agent is listed as Jason Morales. Jason Morales. The name hit me like a physical blow. The same Jason Morales who was chairing the Art Museum fundraiser that Rebecca was attending tonight. The same man whose name had been appearing with increasing frequency in her conversations over the past few months. "Michael, are you all right?" Emily was watching me with concern. I forced myself to nod. "Yes. Thank you for finding this out. I appreciate your help and your discretion." "Of course." She hesitated, then added, "If you need anything else, just let me know." As she walked away, I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Rebecca had transferred our savings, money we'd accumulated over years of hard work, money meant for our future, to a business account belonging to Jason Morales. A man I'd never met, but whose name I suddenly realized I'd been hearing for months. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "We still on for lunch? Got your message about urgency." I texted back a confirmation, my fingers feeling numb on the screen. In less than an hour, I'd be sitting across from our financial advisor, explaining that my wife had emptied our accounts. And after that, I'd have to decide what to do with the knowledge that the money had gone to a man whose fundraiser she was attending tonight. A man who, I was beginning to suspect, was far more than just a professional contact. The life I had, thought was solid, the partnership I had believed in, was crumbling beneath my feet. And I had no idea how deep the betrayal went, or what would be left when the dust settled. The restaurant where I was meeting Olivia was a small bistro tucked away on a side street near Pioneer Square. It was quiet, discreet, and far enough from my office that I wouldn't run into colleagues. Perfect for a conversation I never imagined having. I arrived 15 minutes early and requested a table in the back corner. The hostess, sensing my mood, led me to a secluded spot partially hidden by a decorative screen. I ordered a scotch, neat, something I never did at lunch on workdays, and drained half of it before Olivia arrived. She spotted me immediately, her expression shifting from professional warmth to concern as she approached. Olivia Kim had been managing our finances since before Rebecca and I married. At 45, she carried herself with a quiet confidence, her dark hair cut in a precise bob that framed her face. Today, she wore a tailored navy suit, pearl earrings catching the light as she sat down across from me. "This must be serious," she said, nodding toward my drink. "You never have alcohol at business lunches." "This isn't exactly a business lunch," I replied, pulling out my phone. I opened the banking app and slid it across the table. "Take a look." Olivia glanced down, her eyebrows rising slightly. "This is your joint account? What happened to the rest of the funds?" "That's what I'm hoping you can help me understand," I said. "Nearly 350,000 disappeared yesterday in a single wire transfer. I was in Seattle closing the riverfront deal. I didn't authorize this." She looked up sharply. "But Rebecca did." "Apparently." I took another sip of my scotch. "The transfer went to a business account for something called Meridian Ventures, LLC, registered to a man named Jason Morales." Olivia was quiet for a moment, her fingers tapping lightly on the table as she processed this information. "The name isn't familiar to me. Has Rebecca mentioned any major investments she was considering?" "No, but she's mentioned Jason Morales plenty. He chairs some non-profit foundation she's involved with. Tonight they're hosting a fundraiser together." Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes. "And you think—" "I don't know what to think," I interrupted, not ready to speak my suspicions aloud. "What I do know is that my wife transferred our savings, including the commission from my biggest project ever, to a business account belonging to a man I've never met, without discussing it with me." Olivia nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "Let me ask you something, Michael. When you and Rebecca set up your financial accounts with me, do you remember the conversation we had about protection mechanisms?" I frowned, trying to recall. It had been years ago, before our wedding. "Vaguely. Something about separate accounts versus joint access. Among other things." She pulled out her tablet and began tapping through screens. "I always have these discussions with couples, especially when there's significant income disparity or substantial assets involved. Most people forget the details, which is understandable." She turned the tablet toward me, displaying a document with both our signatures at the bottom. "This is the financial protection rider you both signed when establishing your accounts. Section 4.3 specifically addresses unauthorized transfers, exceeding certain thresholds." I leaned forward, reading the highlighted text. "In the event that either party initiates a transfer exceeding 20% of the total joint account balance without documented consent from both account holders, such action may trigger the Contingent Balance Protection Protocol. Under this protocol, the financial institution reserves the right to freeze remaining assets and initiate recovery procedures for transferred funds, pending resolution through mediation or legal channels." "What does this mean in practical terms?" I asked, hope flickering for the first time since discovering the empty account. "It means," Olivia said carefully, "that Rebecca's transfer, assuming it was indeed unauthorized by you, crossed a threshold that gives us options. But Michael, before we go down this road, I need to ask, is there any possibility Rebecca made this transfer with your knowledge, perhaps during a conversation you've forgotten?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "We make all major financial decisions together, always have. A transfer of this size. We would have discussed it extensively." Olivia nodded, seemingly satisfied with my conviction. "Then, as your financial advisor, I need to inform you of your options. First, we can contact the bank immediately and initiate the protection protocol. This would freeze any remaining assets in your joint accounts and potentially allow for recovery of the transferred funds." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "Wait," she cautioned. "There are implications you need to understand. Triggering this protocol is essentially accusing Rebecca of financial impropriety. It's a serious step that will likely damage your relationship, possibly beyond repair if there's an innocent explanation." I laughed bitterly. "What innocent explanation could there possibly be for secretly transferring our life savings to another man's business account?" I don't know, Olivia admitted. But as your advisor, I need to ensure you understand the consequences of each option. The second approach would be to confront Rebecca directly, give her a chance to explain before involving financial institutions and potentially legal authorities. I stared into my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. My mind raced through scenarios, none of them good. If I confronted Rebecca, and this transfer was what I feared it was, part of an exit strategy with a lover, she'd have time to cover her tracks, perhaps move the money again. But if I triggered the protection protocol, and there was somehow an innocent explanation, no, I couldn't imagine any scenario where this was innocent. There's more you should know, I said finally, looking back at Olivia. My assistant did some digging. Meridian Ventures was established 3 months ago, and yesterday wasn't the first withdrawal, just the largest. There have been smaller transfers. There's 5, 10,000 at a time, happening regularly for weeks. I just didn't notice because they weren't large enough to trigger alerts. Olivia's professional demeanor slipped slightly, genuine concern showing through. Michael, I'm sorry, but this sounds methodical and deliberate. I agree. I straightened my shoulders. Decision made. Let's trigger the protocol. I want those funds recovered and the account frozen. Whatever is happening, I need to protect myself. Olivia nodded, taking out her phone. I'll call my contact at the bank directly. They can initiate the process immediately. She paused, her finger hovering over the screen. Once this starts, it can't be easily reversed. Are you certain? I'm certain, I replied, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Whatever Rebecca is involved in, whatever she's planning with Jason Morales, I won't be financing it with money I've worked my entire career to earn. As Olivia made the call, I gazed out the window at the pedestrians passing by. People going about their normal lives, unaware that my world was imploding. How many of them had experienced moments like this? Points of no return where the life you thought you had suddenly revealed itself to be a carefully constructed illusion. Olivia's voice brought me back to the present. It's done, she said, putting down her phone. The recovery process has been initiated, and your remaining joint accounts are frozen. My contact says they'll need a formal statement from you this afternoon documenting that the transfer was unauthorized. What happens next? I asked. The bank will contact the receiving institution, Pacific Northwest Bank in this case, and notify them of the disputed transfer. They'll freeze those funds pending investigation. Within 24 to 48 hours, you should receive notification that either the funds have been returned to your account or that the recipient is contesting the recovery. And if they contest it, then it becomes a legal matter, Olivia said, which brings me to my next recommendation. You need to speak with an attorney immediately. This isn't just about recovering the money anymore, Michael. This is about protecting yourself going forward. I nodded, already scrolling through my contacts. Leonard Hoffman. He handled the contracts for my firm's partnership agreement. Would he be appropriate for this situation? Olivia hesitated. Family law isn't his specialty. For something like this, you need someone who specifically handles high-asset divorce cases, someone who understands both the financial and emotional complexities involved. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow, even though it had been circling in the back of my mind since discovering the transfer. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I can recommend someone, Olivia continued gently. Victoria Winters. She's discreet, extremely competent, and has extensive experience with cases involving financial misconduct. Set it up, I said, finishing my scotch. Today, if possible. As Olivia made another call, I found myself staring at my wedding ring, twisting it unconsciously around my finger. 8 years of marriage, reduced to financial transactions and legal strategies. How had we ended up here? What had I missed? Victoria can see you at 4 this afternoon, Olivia said, ending her call. I've explained the basics of the situation. Thank You, I replied, genuinely grateful for her efficiency and composure. For everything. Michael, she said, her professional distance softening slightly. I've been your financial advisor for a long time. I've seen you and Rebecca build a life together. Whatever is happening now, don't rush to conclusions before. You have all the facts. Money doesn't always tell the whole story. But as I left the restaurant and headed back to the office, I couldn't help thinking that in this case it told enough. The careful planning, the systematic withdrawals culminating in yesterday's massive transfer, this wasn't impulsive. This was calculated. And tonight, while I was presenting the final riverfront plans to the city council, Rebecca would be at a fundraiser with Jason Morales, the man she'd sent our money to. The question wasn't just why anymore. It was what came next. Don't remember much about the rest of that afternoon. I somehow went through the motions of the riverfront presentation, operating on autopilot while my personal life collapsed around me. The city council members nodded approvingly at the renderings, asked predictable questions about sustainability, features and community impact, and ultimately gave their unanimous approval for the project to proceed. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a career-defining triumph. Instead, I felt nothing but a hollow ache where pride should have been. By 3:45, I was in my car heading to Victoria Winter's office in the Pearl District. The area's renovated warehouses housed high-end boutiques, restaurants, and the kind of sleek professional offices that screamed exclusivity. Victoria's firm occupied the top floor of a converted brick building, its interior a study in understated luxury, mahogany furnishings, original artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the West Hills. Our home was visible in the distance, a cruel reminder of the life I thought I had. Victoria's assistant, a polished young man who introduced himself as Trevor, escorted me to a conference room rather than Victoria's office, a subtle indication that this meeting was strictly business. I sat alone for exactly 3 minutes before Victoria entered, hand extended, expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, "I'm Victoria Winters. Olivia briefed me on your situation." Victoria was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe chignon. Her charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, her only jewelry a pair of small diamond studs and a slim platinum watch. Everything about her conveyed competence and discretion. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," I replied, shaking her. "A hand. Time is often critical in cases like yours," she said, taking a seat across from me. "I understand your wife has transferred a significant sum to an external business account without your knowledge or consent. Nearly $350,000 yesterday, plus smaller amounts over the past 3 months that I've only just discovered." Victoria nodded, making a note on the legal pad in front of her. "And Olivia has triggered the contingent balance protection protocol with your bank?" "Yes, this afternoon." "Good. That gives us leverage." She looked up from her notes. "Mr. Montgomery, I need to ask you some difficult questions now. The answers will help me understand what we're dealing with and how best to protect you. I need complete honesty, even if the truth is uncomfortable. Can you do that?" I nodded, bracing myself. "How? Would you characterize your marriage prior to this discovery? Were there signs of trouble, discussions about separation?" "No," I said, then hesitated. "At least, I didn't think so. Rebecca has been distant lately, more involved with her non-profit work, less present at home. But nothing that suggested she was planning to leave, let alone steal our savings." "And this man, Jason Morales, what do you know about him?" "Almost nothing. He chairs a foundation connected to the art museum where Rebecca volunteers. They've been working together on fundraising events for the past few months. Tonight, in fact, they're co-hosting a gala." Victoria's eyebrow raised slightly. And you were planning to attend this gala? No. I have the riverfront presentation. Rebecca knows that. Convenient timing, Victoria murmured. Have you checked your wife's phone records, email, text messages? I felt a flush of shame. No, we've always respected each other's privacy. That privacy may have provided cover for an affair and financial misconduct, Victoria said bluntly. From this moment forward, you need to operate under the assumption that your wife is working against your interests. That means protecting yourself by gathering information. The word affair hung in the air between us. I'd been dancing around it in my mind, but hearing Victoria say it aloud made it suddenly painfully real. You think she's having an affair? With Morales? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I don't know, Victoria replied. But transferring substantial funds to his business account suggests a relationship that goes beyond professional collaboration. We need to understand the nature of that relationship to properly address the financial aspects of your situation. She slid a folder across the table to me. This is a standard agreement for my services, along with my fee structure. Review it, and if you're comfortable proceeding, we can begin immediately. I glanced at the hourly rate, eye-watering but not surprising, and signed without hesitation. Whatever this cost, I couldn't afford not to have the best representation. Now, Victoria said, taking back the signed agreement, let's discuss immediate next steps. The bank has frozen your joint accounts and initiated the recovery process. That's good, but we need to go further. She began listing action items, her tone methodical. First, secure your personal financial accounts, change passwords, remove. Rebecca as an authorized user where possible. Second, document all joint assets, property, investments, vehicles, artwork. Third, obtain copies of all financial records for the past 5 years, tax returns, bank statements, investment accounts. The list continued, each item driving home the reality that my marriage was likely over. As Victoria spoke, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching someone else's life disintegrate. Mr. Montgomery, are you following me? Victoria's voice cut through my thoughts. Yes, I said, refocusing. It's just overwhelming. Her expression softened slightly. That's normal. Finding out your spouse has betrayed your trust is traumatic. But right now, you need to focus on protecting yourself. The emotional processing will come later. She was right, of course. But as I left her office an hour later, with a folder full of instructions and a head swimming with legal strategies, the emotional reality began to sink in. 8 years of marriage, countless shared experiences, private jokes, quiet moments, the home we'd built together, the future we'd planned, all of it potentially built on lies. I sat in my car in the parking garage, unable to start the engine. For the first time since discovering the empty account, I felt tears threatening, not just from sadness, but from a potent mixture of betrayal, anger, and humiliation. Had everyone known? Had I been the oblivious husband focused on my career while my wife carried on with another man? The thought made me physically ill. A phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Good luck with your presentation tonight. I'm heading to the gala now. Don't wait up. The casual normalcy of it felt like a slap. How could she act as if everything was fine while she systematically dismantled our life together? I started to type a dozen different responses, accusations, questions, expressions of hurt, but deleted them all. Victoria had been clear. Don't tip your hand. Don't let Rebecca know what you've discovered until we have a clear strategy. Instead, I simply wrote, thanks. Good luck with the fundraiser. The city lights were coming on as I finally drove home, the streets blurring through unshed tears. Our house, the dream home I'd designed myself, loomed dark and empty as I pulled into the driveway. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the modern lines and expansive windows that had once represented everything I'd achieved. Inside, the silence was oppressive. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, seeing everything differently now. The framed photos of our travels felt like artifacts from a fictional relationship. The carefully chosen furniture suddenly seemed like stage dressing for a life that had never been real. In our bedroom, Rebecca's perfume lingered in the air. I opened her closet, running my hand along the organized row of designer clothing. How much of this life had I financed while she planned her escape? How long had she been lying to me? I found myself in my home office, opening the safe hidden behind a custom bookshelf. Inside were our most important documents: property deeds, insurance policies, birth certificates, our marriage license. I removed everything, spreading the papers across my desk. According to Victoria, I needed to make copies of all of it, create a comprehensive record of our assets and legal bindings. As I sorted through the documents, a folded paper fell from between the pages of our home's deed. I didn't recognize it immediately. Some kind of agreement with both our signatures, dated from the week before our wedding. As I unfolded it, the title caught my eye: Post-Nuptial Property Protection Agreement. I frowned, scanning the document. I had a vague memory of signing papers in the whirlwind of wedding preparations, but I couldn't recall the specifics of this one. It appeared to be a supplementary agreement to our prenup, with detailed provisions about financial misconduct. My phone rang, startling me. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. "Michael," she said when I answered, her voice tight with urgency. "I just heard from my contact at the bank. The funds transfer has been frozen, but there's a complication. Jason Morales is contesting the hold, claiming the money was a legitimate investment that you approved." "That's a lie," I said, anger surging through me. "I know," Olivia replied. "But he submitted documentation, what appears to be an investment agreement with both your signatures." "I never signed anything. The bank is treating it as a dispute between parties. They won't release the funds to either account until it's resolved." I gripped the phone tighter, fury building. "So Rebecca and her lover get to keep our money tied up indefinitely?" "Not necessarily," Olivia said. "This is exactly why we triggered the protection protocol. It gives us options. But you need to move quickly. Have you spoken with Victoria Winters?" "Yes, just left her office." "Good. Call her immediately about this development." "And Michael?" She hesitated. "Be careful. This level of planning, the systematic withdrawals, the fabricated investment agreement, suggests Rebecca and Morales have been orchestrating this for some time. Don't underestimate what they might do next." As I hung up, my gaze fell back to the forgotten post-nuptial agreement in my hand. Something about its timing and provisions nagged at me. I needed to show this to Victoria, have her explain exactly what it meant. I photographed every page with my phone, then carefully returned the original to the safe. Whatever game Rebecca was playing, I was now a participant whether I wanted to be or not. And I was done being the oblivious husband who didn't see the betrayal happening right under his nose. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, legal maneuvers, and the painful dismantling of the life we'd built. But tonight, in the empty house that no longer felt like home, I allowed myself to grieve for what I'd lost and gather strength for the battle ahead. I woke before dawn, having barely slept. The bed felt enormous without Rebecca beside me, though she'd been sleeping on her side with minimal contact for months, another warning sign I'd ignored. The house creaked and settled around me, sounds I normally found comforting, now seeming ominous and hollow. My phone showed no missed calls or messages from Rebecca, according to the location sharing we'd set up years ago for safety. She hadn't come home last night. Her dot on the map showed her at an address in the Southwest Hills, an area even more exclusive than ours, with sprawling estates and spectacular views. Jason Morales' home, I presumed, though I couldn't bring myself to confirm it by searching the address. Instead, I took a long shower, letting the scalding water wash over me as I tried to clear my head. By 6:30, I was dressed and on my second, cup of coffee, reviewing the list of action items Victoria had given me. The first, secure all personal and financial information. I moved methodically through the house, collecting important documents, backing up my computer files, and changing passwords on every account I could think of. I removed Rebecca as an authorized user on my personal credit cards, a process that required surprisingly few questions from the customer service representatives. Divorcing? One asked sympathetically when I hesitated over the reason for removal. Yes, I replied, the first time I'd said it aloud. At 80, I called Victoria's office. Trevor answered, informing me that Victoria was in court but had left explicit instructions regarding my case. A forensic accountant would contact me shortly to begin tracing the funds and documenting our financial history. Additionally, a private investigator named Samuel Reeves would call to discuss surveillance options. Surveillance, I repeated, caught off guard. Standard procedure in cases involving potential infidelity and financial misconduct, Trevor explained smoothly. Ms. Winters believes documenting your wife's activities may prove beneficial. The thought made my stomach turn, but I agreed to speak with the investigator. What choice did I have? Rebecca had already proved willing to lie and steal. I needed to protect myself with facts. I arrived at the office earlier than usual, nodding to the security guard as I made my way to the elevator. When I reached my floor, I was surprised to find Emily already at her desk, despite the early hour. She looked up as I approached, her expression carefully neutral. "Good morning," she said, extending a coffee cup. "Extra shot, just how you like it." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. "You're here early." "I thought you might. Need some support," she said simply, "after yesterday's situation." "I appreciate that." I hesitated, then decided to be direct. "Emily, this is going to get complicated. I may need your discretion and help in the coming days." She nodded without hesitation. "Of course. Whatever you need." "First, I need to clear my schedule for the morning. I have some urgent personal matters to handle." "Already done," she said, surprising me. "I had a feeling after yesterday that you might need some flexibility. I've moved your team check-in to Thursday and told the riverfront developers you're finalizing permit documentation today." I studied her face, momentarily thrown by her efficiency and insight. "Thank you. That's exactly what I needed." "That's my job," she said with a small smile, "to anticipate problems and solve them before they become issues." My office felt like a sanctuary as I closed the door behind me. Here at least I had control. Success I'd earned through talent and hard work, recognition that couldn't be taken away by betrayal. I had just settled at my desk when my cell phone rang, an unknown number. "Michael Montgomery," I answered. "Mr. Montgomery, this is Samuel Reeves. Victoria Winters suggested I call you regarding a sensitive matter." The private investigator's voice was deep and measured, with the careful precision of someone accustomed to discussing delicate subjects. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop several blocks from my office in an hour. Next, I called Olivia for an update on the frozen funds. "The bank's fraud department is reviewing the case," she explained. "They've requested documentation from both accounts to verify the nature of the transfer. It's standard procedure, but it buys us time." "Time for what?" I asked. "To build your case. If Rebecca and Morales submitted falsified investment documents, that's fraud. But proving it requires evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Ideally, proof that your signature was forged, or that the document itself was created after the fact. That's where Victoria's team comes in. The forensic accountant can examine the timing of document creation, and the investigator can look for patterns of deception." I thanked her and ended the call, my mind racing. This was no longer just about recovering money. It was about exposing a deliberate scheme to defraud me. The thought sent a chill through me. Who had Rebecca become? Or had she always been this person and I'd been too blind to see it? Samuel Reeves was easy to spot at the coffee shop, mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and the watchful eyes of someone who notices everything. He wore a nondescript grey suit that somehow managed to make him forgettable in a crowd, which I supposed was an asset in his profession. "Mr. Montgomery," he said, extending his hand as I approached. "Thank you for meeting me." We settled at a corner table with our coffees, and Reeves got straight to business. "Victoria has briefed me on the basics. Your wife has transferred significant funds to a business account belonging to a man you believe she's romantically involved with. You need documentation of their relationship and activities to support potential legal action. Is that an accurate summary?" "Yes," I said, the directness of his assessment catching me off guard. He nodded, opening a slim laptop. "I'll need some information to begin. Your wife's full name, physical description, vehicle details, regular schedule, and any known locations she frequents. Same for the male subject. For the next 20 minutes, I provided every detail I could think of. Rebecca's routines, the organizations she volunteered with, places she regularly visited. For Jason Morales, I had less concrete information, but shared what I knew from Rebecca's mentions and the minimal research I'd done. "What exactly will you be looking for?" I asked as Reeves made notes. "Patterns," he replied. "Times and locations where they meet. Physical interactions that suggest a relationship beyond professional collaboration. Evidence of shared living arrangements or overnight stays. Most importantly, any discussions or exchanges of documents related to financial matters." He paused, studying my face. "I should warn you, Mr. Montgomery, this process can be difficult for clients. The information I uncover may be painful to hear." "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I did. "I need the truth, whatever it is." Reeves nodded. "I'll provide daily reports and photographic evidence where relevant. I'll begin surveillance today, focusing initially on the Art Museum Foundation offices and Mr. Morales's residence." As I left the meeting, a strange calm settled over me. After days of reeling from shock and betrayal, I was finally taking action. The passive recipient of Rebecca's duplicity was gone, replaced by someone determined to uncover the truth and protect what was rightfully his. Back at my office, I found 3 missed calls from Rebecca. No voicemails, no texts, just the notification that she'd tried to reach me. I stared at my phone, debating whether to call back. Victoria had advised minimal contact, especially regarding financial matters, until we had a clear strategy. Before I could decide, my desk phone rang. Emily's voice came through the speaker. "Michael, Rebecca's here. She's demanding to see you." My pulse jumped. "Here? At the office?" "Yes, she seems upset." I took a deep breath. This confrontation was inevitable, but I hadn't expected it to happen at my workplace. "Send her in." Rebecca appeared in my doorway moments later, immaculately dressed as always, in a tailored cream suit that set off her tan. Her makeup was flawless, but couldn't quite hide the tension around her eyes. She closed the door behind her with deliberate care. "Why are our accounts frozen?" she demanded without preamble. "I tried to access funds this morning and was told everything's on hold, pending an investigation." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. The woman before me was both achingly familiar and completely foreign, the same Rebecca I'd loved for years, but now revealed as someone capable of profound deception. "You know why?" I said quietly. "I don't, actually," she replied, her voice controlled but with an undercurrent of panic. "Which is why I'm here. Some bank error has locked us out of our own money, and I need you to fix it." Her performance was remarkable, the perfect blend of confusion and indignation. If I hadn't seen the transfer records myself, if I hadn't learned about the falsified investment documents, I might have believed her. "It's not an error," I said, maintaining eye contact. "It's a security protocol triggered by unusual account activity. Specifically, the transfer of $347,000 to Meridian Ventures, a flicker of something." Surprise, alarm, calculation crossed her face before she composed it again. That was a completely legitimate investment opportunity. I told you about it last month. No, I said firmly. You didn't. I did, she insisted. Remember, after the Wilson charity auction, we discussed diversifying our portfolio with small business investments. We had attended the Wilson auction, and we had discussed investments afterward, but in general terms, nothing about specific companies or amounts. She was weaving truth with lies, creating a plausible scenario that would be difficult to definitively disprove. Rebecca, I said, my voice low and steady, we both know that's not true. We never discussed investing in Meridian Ventures. We never discussed transferring nearly our entire savings. And we certainly never discussed you signing my name to investment documents without my knowledge. Her expression hardened, the pretense of confusion falling away. The bank told you about the documents, among other things. She was silent for a moment, recalculating. It was a time-sensitive opportunity. I knew you'd agree once you understood the potential returns. I was going to explain everything tonight over dinner. After the money was already gone? After you spent the night at Jason Morales' house? Her eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected me to know that. You're having me followed? I know where you were last night. That's all that matters. Rebecca's carefully constructed facade cracked, anger bleeding through. So what now? You freeze our accounts, hire some sleazy private detective to follow me around, all because I made one investment decision without consulting you? One decision, I repeated incredulously. You emptied our joint accounts, forged my signature on legal documents, and spent the night with the man you gave our money to. That's not one decision, Rebecca. That's a calculated betrayal. She crossed her arms, shifting strategies again. And now you're jumping to wild conclusions. Jason is a business associate. Yes, I stayed at his guest house last night after the gala ran late. Yes, I invested in his company because I believe in its potential. But you're turning a simple misunderstanding into some kind of soap opera. I shook my head, no longer susceptible to her manipulations. The accounts will remain frozen pending investigation. If you need funds for legitimate expenses, you'll need to go through the bank's verification process. This is ridiculous, she snapped. It's my money too. And that's all you'll get, your portion, not mine. Rebecca stared at me, a calculating look in her eyes. You're making a mistake, Michael. A public, messy mistake that will embarrass us both. No, I said, standing up. The mistake was thinking I could trust you. The mistake was believing we were partners. Everything else is just consequences. She opened her mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. I sank back into my chair, adrenaline still coursing through me. The encounter had confirmed what I'd suspected. Rebecca had no intention of admitting the truth. She would lie, manipulate and rewrite history to justify her actions. But something had shifted inside me during that confrontation. The devastation of betrayal was still there, but now it was hardening into resolve. Rebecca had underestimated. Me assumed I would accept her explanations or be too embarrassed to fight back. She was wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed Victoria Winters. It's Michael Montgomery, I said when she answered. My wife just came to my office, demanding access to the frozen accounts. She's claiming the transfer was a legitimate investment we'd discussed. As expected, Victoria replied. What else? She admitted staying at Morales' house last night, but says it was innocent. She's sticking to the story that this is all a misunderstanding. And how did you respond? I told her the accounts would remain frozen pending investigation. Good, Victoria said approvingly. Direct but not accusatory. Did she make any threats or admissions we can use? Not explicitly, but she's definitely worried about public embarrassment. She said I was making a public, messy mistake that will embarrass us both. Interesting choice of words, Victoria noted. She's concerned about appearance, which suggests she has something to hide. By the way, I received the photos of the post-nuptial agreement you found. It's quite interesting, and potentially very useful to us. Can you come to my office at 5 just today? I have something important to discuss. As I hung up, I glanced at the time. Nearly noon. 5 hours until my meeting with Victoria. 5 hours to continue gathering information and securing my position. The passive phase of shock and reaction was over. Now it was time to fight back. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and design reviews. I forced myself to focus on work, to engage with my team as if my personal life wasn't imploding. Architecture had always been my refuge, the clean lines, the mathematical precision, the ability to create order from chaos. Now I clung to it, like a lifeline, the only part of my world that still made sense. At 4:30, I wrapped up a conference call and gathered my things to leave for Victoria's office. Emily appeared in my doorway, a concerned look on her face. "Everything okay?" she asked. "After Rebecca left this morning?" "As okay as it can be," I replied, not wanting to burden her with details, but appreciating her concern. "I'm dealing with some complicated personal issues." Emily nodded, understanding in her eyes. "If you need help with anything, rescheduling, fielding calls, whatever, just let me know." "No questions asked." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." The drive to Victoria's office gave me time to process the day's events. Rebecca's visit had clarified something important. She was committed to her version of events, to the fiction that this was all just a misunderstanding about an investment opportunity, which meant she was also committed to keeping our money with Jason Morales. Victoria was waiting for me in her office this time, rather than the conference room. A subtle shift that suggested our relationship had moved from initial consultation to established representation. She greeted me with a brief nod, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "Before we begin," she said, "I should inform you that we've received an interesting development. Your wife has retained counsel. Martin Shepherd." "Should I know that name?" I asked. "You should." "Martin specializes in high-asset divorces, specifically cases involving business interests and complex financial arrangements. He's very good." She leaned forward slightly. "The fact that Rebecca has hired him tells us two things. One, she's anticipating divorce proceedings, and two, she intends to fight aggressively for financial assets." I absorbed this information, feeling a strange mix of pain and vindication. Rebecca's hiring of a divorce attorney confirmed what I'd suspected. She'd been planning this for some time. Our conversation this morning had been theater, nothing more. "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "It means we move forward assuming full adversarial proceedings." Victoria picked up a folder from her desk. "Which brings me to why I asked you here today. I've reviewed the post-nuptial agreement you found, and it contains what could be a critical provision." She opened the folder, extracting a document with highlighted sections. "This agreement, which both you and Rebecca signed 8 years ago just before your wedding, contains unusual language regarding financial misconduct. Specifically, it states that any party found to have engaged in deliberate financial deception automatically forfeits claim to 50% of the marital assets." I frowned, trying to recall signing such a document. "That doesn't sound like something standard." "It's not," Victoria confirmed. "It's quite specific and unusually punitive. It appears to have been added to a standard post-nuptial template." She studied my face. "You don't remember discussing this provision?" "Honestly, I barely remember signing a post-nup at all. It was right before the wedding. I was focused on architectural drawings for our first home, and Rebecca handled most of the legal paperwork." She said it was standard protection for both of us. Victoria's expression sharpened with interest. So Rebecca guided the post-nuptial process. Did she select the attorney who drafted it? I think so, I said, straining to recall details from 8 years ago. A friend of her family, I believe. I met with him once, but Rebecca handled most of the communication. Victoria made a note. This could be significant. If Rebecca specifically requested this provision, knowing she might someday want to invoke it against you, but has now violated it herself, it would be incredibly ironic, I finished. More than ironic. It could be legally decisive. Victoria slid the document across the desk to me. The provision defines deliberate financial deception as including unauthorized transfer of joint assets exceeding $50,000 and falsification of the other party's consent or signature on financial instruments. I stared at the highlighted text, a strange feeling settling over me. So, if we can prove Rebecca transferred the money without my consent and forged my signature on the investment documents, she would forfeit 50% of her claim to marital assets, Victoria confirmed. In practical terms, instead of a likely 50-50 split, you could be looking at something closer to 75 to 25 in your favor. The implication was staggering. Rebecca may have inadvertently set a trap for herself years ago, a trap she'd now walked directly into. How do we prove the forgery, I asked. That's our next step. I've engaged a forensic document examiner to analyze the investment agreement Rebecca submitted to the bank. We'll need exemplars of your actual signature for comparison. I pulled out my checkbook and signed several blank deposit slips. Will these work? Perfectly, Victoria said, collecting them. Now there's something else you should know. I received a preliminary report from Samuel Reeves this afternoon. She slid a manila envelope across the desk. Inside were several photographs. Rebecca and Jason Morales entering his home, standing close together on his terrace, his hand resting intimately on the small of her back as he guided her through a doorway. These were taken last night after the museum fundraiser, Victoria explained. Reeves followed them from the event to Morales' residence. Rebecca didn't leave until 8:15 this morning. I stared at the images, feeling a renewed surge of betrayal. Despite having already known she'd spent the night there, seeing it documented in cold, clinical photographs made it undeniably real. There's more, Victoria continued, her tone gentler now. Reeves conducted preliminary background research on Jason Morales. He's not just the chairman of the Museum Foundation. He's a real estate developer specializing in mixed-use commercial properties. Something clicked in my mind. Like the Riverfront Project? Exactly like the Riverfront Project, Victoria confirmed. In fact, Meridian Ventures LLC appears to have been established specifically to bid on parcels adjacent to your development site. The pieces were suddenly falling into place. Rebecca has been on the museum board for years. She would have access to city planning information, donor connections, and through you, inside knowledge of the riverfront development timeline and specifications, Victoria finished. Information that would be extremely valuable to a competing developer. I sat back, the full scope of the betrayal washing over me. This wasn't just about an affair or stolen money. Rebecca had potentially been funneling proprietary information about my biggest project to a business competitor, information that could be worth millions in development opportunities. We need to prove it, I said, my voice hardening. Not just for the divorce, but for my firm's protection. If confidential project details were leaked to a competitor, it could expose both you and Rebecca to legal liability, Victoria agreed, which gives us additional leverage. Reeves is continuing his investigation, focusing now on professional connections and meetings between Rebecca, Morales, and anyone associated with city planning or the Riverfront Project. She closed the folder, her expression serious. There's one more thing to consider, Michael. Given the potential professional implications, we should discuss whether to bring your firm's legal counsel into the loop. This could affect more than just your marriage. I nodded, already thinking about the ramifications. The riverfront project involved dozens of stakeholders, millions in investments, and years of careful planning. If Rebecca had compromised its integrity for Morales' benefit, I'll speak with our managing partner tomorrow, I decided. Discreetly for now, but you're right, they need to be aware of the potential risk. Victoria stood, signaling the end of our meeting. You're handling this remarkably well, she observed. Many clients in your position would be overwhelmed. I still am, I admitted, but anger is starting to outweigh shock. And anger at least is productive. Channel it wisely, she advised. The coming weeks will test your composure. Rebecca and her attorney will likely attempt to provoke emotional responses that could undermine your position. As I left Victoria's office, the sun was setting over Portland, painting the city in warm golden light that belied the coldness I felt inside. I drove home on autopilot, my mind racing with the day's revelations. The beautiful home that had once represented our shared success now loomed before me like a monument to deception. Inside, I moved through the quiet rooms with new purpose. Following Victoria's advice, I began a methodical inventory of our possessions, photographing artwork, electronics, jewelry, anything of significant value. In Rebecca's home office, I carefully avoided opening drawers or files that might later be claimed as private, instead noting their existence for potential legal discovery. In our bedroom, Rebecca's perfume lingered on her pillow. I stood for a moment, staring at the king-sized bed we'd shared for 8 years, remembering happier times. Had any of it been real, or had I been a means to an end from the beginning? A successful architect whose career could benefit her. Lovers' business interests? The sound of the garage door opening jolted me from my thoughts. Rebecca was home. I quickly moved to my office, not ready for another confrontation without Victoria's guidance. I heard Rebecca's footsteps on the stairs, then a soft knock on my office door. "Michael?" "Yes," I replied, not opening the door. "We need to talk," she said, her voice conciliatory. "About this morning, about the accounts, about everything. Can I come in?" I hesitated, Victoria's warnings echoing in my mind. Any conversation now could be tactical, designed to extract admissions or create a record favorable to Rebecca's position. "I don't think that's a good idea," I responded finally. "Not tonight." A pause. "Are you serious? You're refusing to even talk to me." "I think we should communicate through our attorneys for now." A longer silence. Then, with an edge in her voice, "So that's how it's going to be." "That's how you made it," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Rebecca's footsteps retreated down the hall. A few minutes later, I heard the garage door again. Through the window, I watched her car back out of the driveway and disappear down the street, heading no doubt to Jason Morales' home. I sat at my desk, staring at the photographs Samuel Reeves had provided. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to align. The systematic withdrawals of money, the forged investment documents, the connection between Morales' business and my riverfront project. But I still didn't have the complete picture, the incontrovertible proof that would protect both my personal assets and my professional reputation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Montgomery, Samuel Reeves here. Found something interesting in public records. Morales' company filed permit applications for a commercial development near Riverfront 3 months ago, exactly when Meridian Ventures was established. Call me." I dialed immediately, a sense of grim satisfaction building. The investigation was yielding results faster than I'd expected. Rebecca had been careful, but not careful enough. She hadn't anticipated I would fight back so quickly or so thoroughly. As Reeves answered and began detailing his findings, I felt something shift inside me. a hardening of resolve, a clarity of purpose. Rebecca had betrayed not just my trust, but my work, my reputation, everything I'd built. She'd underestimated me, assumed I would be too shocked or humiliated to mount an effective defense. That was her mistake. And now, armed with the hidden clause she herself had inserted into our post-nuptial agreement, I was going to make her regret it. The next morning dawned grey and rainy, Portland's typical early spring weather matching my mood. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with questions and strategies. Rebecca hadn't returned home, her side of the bed remaining untouched. According to the location app still active on both our phones, she'd spent the night at Morales' house again, no longer bothering to hide her whereabouts. I arrived at the office early, determined to speak with James Harrison, the managing partner at Westlake Architectural Group, before the day's meetings began. James had been my mentor when I first joined the firm 12 years ago, and he'd championed my promotion to partner. If anyone would understand the delicate situation I was facing, it would be him. His assistant waved me in without announcement, a privilege of partnership, and James looked up from his computer with a smile that quickly faded when he saw my expression. "Michael," he said, rising to shake my hand, "you look like hell. What's going on?" "I need to discuss something confidential," I replied, closing the door behind me. "Something that may affect the firm, specifically the riverfront project." James's expression turned serious. He gestured to the sitting area in the corner of his spacious office, a more comfortable setting for difficult conversations. "Talk to me." For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the situation in clinical, professional terms. Rebecca's unauthorized transfer of funds, her relationship with Jason Morales, the connection to Meridian Ventures, and most importantly, the timing of their permit applications for development near our riverfront project. James listened without interruption, his expression darkening. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, fingers steepled under his chin. "This is problematic," he said finally. "If confidential information about Riverfront has been compromised, our clients could have grounds for legal action against the firm, not to mention the competitive disadvantage it creates for our development partners." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm bringing it to you now, before we have all the details. My private investigator is gathering evidence about specific meetings and information exchanges, but I thought you should be aware of the potential issue." James nodded, his legal training evident in his measured response. "We'll need to conduct an internal review, determine what information Rebecca might have had access to through you, assess potential damage, all while keeping this extremely quiet, of course." "Of course," I agreed. "The last thing we need is for clients to panic." "And you're certain about the connection between your wife's relationship with this developer and the transfer of funds?" "The timing is too coincidental to ignore," I replied. "Meridian Ventures was established 3 months ago, exactly when Rebecca began making smaller transfers from our accounts. The property they're targeting borders the riverfront development, and the major transfer happened the day after I secured final approval from the city council." James exhaled slowly. "I've known you a long time, Michael, seen you build a career, a marriage. I'm sorry you're going through this, both personally and professionally." His sympathy threatened to crack my carefully maintained composure. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Take whatever time you need to handle the personal aspects," James continued. "I'll involve our legal team discreetly to assess the professional implications. And Michael," he hesitated, "this won't affect your position here. Your work on Riverfront has been exemplary. You couldn't have anticipated this situation." I left James's office feeling marginally lighter. At least my professional standing wasn't in jeopardy, yet. Everything depended on how much information Rebecca had accessed and shared, and whether we could prove it. Back at my desk, I found a message from Victoria asking me to call her immediately. I closed my office door and dialed. The forensic document examiner completed a preliminary analysis. "Of the investment agreement," she said without preamble. "The signature is definitely not yours. It's a skilled forgery, but with clear inconsistencies when compared to your exemplars. A small victory, but significant. So we can prove she forged my signature." "Yes, which triggers the financial misconduct clause in your postnuptial agreement. But there's more." Victoria's voice took on an edge of controlled excitement. "The document examiner found something unexpected. The investment agreement wasn't created when Rebecca claims it was. The metadata shows it was created just 2 days before the major transfer, not weeks earlier, as she stated to the bank." This was the smoking gun. Proof that the investment story was fabricated after the fact to justify the transfer. So, she's committed fraud. Potentially, yes, but I wouldn't lead with criminal accusations just yet. First, we use this to secure your financial position. I've drafted a letter to Martin Shepherd outlining our evidence and invoking the postnuptial clause. I'm sending it over for your review, but I recommend we deliver it today. As we wrapped up the call, my cell phone buzzed with a text from Samuel Reeves. "Need to meet urgently. Found something significant. Usual place, noon?" The rain had intensified by the time I reached the coffee shop where I'd first met with Reeves. He was already there, a manila envelope on the table beside his coffee cup. His expression was grave as I slid into the seat across from him. "What did you find?" I asked, dispensing with pleasantries. Reeves pushed the envelope toward me. "Evidence that goes beyond your divorce case. This could have serious legal implications for both Rebecca and Morales." Inside were printouts of emails, dozens of them, between Rebecca and Jason, dating back nearly a year. I scanned the first few, my blood running cold as I realized what I was seeing. Rebecca had been systematically sharing confidential information about the Riverfront project. Timelines, design specifications, even financial projections that weren't public knowledge. "How did you get these?" I asked, looking up at Reeves. "Legal means," he assured me. "Rebecca used her personal email for these exchanges, but accessed it from your home network. The backup system you mentioned, having installed after a previous computer crash, retained copies in your home server's cache. I worked with a digital forensics specialist to recover them." I continued reading, each email more damning than the last. In one, Rebecca explicitly mentioned information Michael doesn't know I've seen regarding exclusive development rights around the riverfront area. In another, she detailed conversations she'd overheard between me and city officials about rezoning plans not yet announced. But the most shocking revelation came in an email dated just 3 weeks ago. Rebecca had written to Jason, "With the funds transfer scheduled for next week, we should be positioned to move forward immediately after the council approval. Michael has no idea about our plans, and by the time he figures it out, the property will be secured and will be beyond the point of no return." "This goes beyond an affair," I said, my voice tight with anger. "This is corporate espionage." Reeves nodded grimly. "It appears your wife and Morales have been planning this for months, using your insider knowledge to position themselves to capitalize on the riverfront development, then using your own money to fund their venture." I sat back, the full magnitude of the betrayal washing over me. This wasn't just about our marriage or even our finances. Rebecca had violated professional ethics, potentially broken laws, and deliberately undermined the project I'd poured years of my life into. "What do I do with this?" I asked, gesturing to the emails. "That depends on your priorities," Reeves replied. "These emails would strengthen your position in divorce proceedings enormously, but they could also be grounds for criminal charges of corporate espionage or fraud, depending on how your firm's confidentiality policies are structured." I needed to think strategically now, not emotionally. These emails were a powerful weapon, but how I used them would determine my path forward, both personally and professionally. "I need to show these to Victoria," I decided. And to my firm's legal counsel. They need to understand the full scope of what's happened. As I gathered the emails and prepared to leave, Reeves stopped me with a final observation. There's one more thing you should know, Mr. Montgomery. Based on the timing and content of these emails, it appears Rebecca's relationship with Morales predates the establishment of Meridian Ventures by several months. This wasn't a recent development. They've been involved for at least a year, possibly longer. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. A year. While I was working late nights on the riverfront project, believing my marriage was solid despite some distance, Rebecca had been actively conspiring with her lover to steal both my money and my work. I left the coffee shop in a daze, the envelope of emails tucked securely in my briefcase. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained dark with clouds, a perfect reflection of my mood as I confronted the truth about the woman I had loved and trusted for 8 years. Victoria's office hummed with activity when I arrived with the envelope of emails. Her assistant immediately ushered me into the conference room where Victoria sat with 2 colleagues, a man she introduced as Alan Burke, the firm's financial analyst, and a woman named Diana Powell, their litigation specialist. "These are the emails Samuel Reeves recovered," I said, placing the envelope on the table. "They show Rebecca has been sharing confidential information about the riverfront project with Morales for nearly a year." Victoria reviewed the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This changes our approach significantly," she said finally, looking up at her colleagues. "We're no longer just dealing with marital asset division. These emails constitute potential corporate espionage." Alan nodded gravely. "The financial implications extend beyond the divorce. There could be civil liability to Mr. Montgomery's firm and their clients, or criminal charges," Diana added, "depending on the confidentiality agreements in place." Victoria turned to me. "Michael, I need to be clear about something. These emails give us tremendous leverage in your divorce proceedings. The post-nuptial clause alone would significantly advantage your position, but this evidence of professional misconduct essentially destroys Rebecca's credibility and negotiating position." "But," I prompted, sensing there was more, "but using these emails means making them part of the court record, which makes them public. That could trigger investigations that affect not just Rebecca and Morales, but potentially your firm's standing with clients who might question security protocols." I understood the dilemma. Using the emails would guarantee a favorable divorce settlement, but could potentially damage the firm's reputation through no fault of their own. "What do you recommend?" I asked. Victoria leaned forward. "A strategic disclosure approach. We inform Martin Shepherd privately of the evidence we possess without immediately filing it with the court. We make a settlement offer that invokes the post-nuptial clause, but goes further. Rebecca relinquishes all claims to marital assets, and in exchange, we don't make the emails public." "Essentially blackmail," Diana noted clinically. "I prefer to call it leverage negotiation," Victoria replied. "And it gives Rebecca a choice, a bad financial outcome or a potentially catastrophic professional and legal one." I considered the options. Part of me wanted public vindication, wanted everyone to know what Rebecca had done. But the wiser part recognized that a private resolution would protect my firm and my professional standing. "Let's do it," I decided. "Draft the settlement offer." As the legal team began outlining terms, my phone buzzed with a call from James Harrison. "Michael," he said, his voice tense, "our legal team reviewed the riverfront documentation. There's clear evidence that confidential information was compromised. We need to discuss containment strategies." "I know," I replied. "I've just discovered emails confirming Rebecca shared information with Morales. I'm with my attorney now. Can your team meet us here?" Within an hour, both legal teams were collaborating on a coordinated approach. One that would protect the firm's interests while strengthening my position in the divorce. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn, and for the first time since discovering the empty bank account, I felt a sense of control returning. Victoria summarized our strategy as the meeting concluded. We move on 3 fronts simultaneously. First, the divorce settlement with the maximum financial advantage to Michael. Second, protection of Westlake Architectural Group's legal position with clients. Third, recovery of the transferred funds with interest and penalties. As I left the conference room, my phone lit up with a text from Rebecca. We need to talk. Things aren't what they seem. Too late. Far too late. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Victoria in her office, staring at the signed settlement agreement on her desk. The document represented the final chapter of my marriage to Rebecca, a comprehensive surrender that left her with only the assets she had brought into our marriage and nothing more. I still can't believe she accepted these terms so quickly, I said, running my finger along the edge of the folder containing the agreement. Victoria smiled thinly. People facing potential criminal charges tend to become remarkably reasonable in civil negotiations, especially when those charges could include corporate espionage, fraud, and misappropriation of confidential information. The strategy had worked better than any of us anticipated. When Martin Shepard received our settlement proposal along with copies of select emails, he had requested just 48 hours to consult with his client. Rebecca had signed the agreement 2 days later without a single counter-proposal or negotiation attempt. The funds have been fully recovered, Victoria continued, reviewing her notes, with the additional 10% penalty triggered by the fraud determination. Your firm's legal team has secured confidentiality agreements from all parties involved, and Meridian Ventures has withdrawn its permit applications for the properties adjacent to Riverfront. It was a comprehensive victory by any measure, yet I felt hollow rather than triumphant. And Rebecca? What happens to her now? Professionally, she's resigned from all her non-profit board positions. The Museum Foundation issued a statement about personal reasons for her departure. As for her relationship with Morales, Victoria hesitated, then continued with characteristic directness. Our sources indicate they're no longer together. Apparently, failed conspiracies aren't conducive to romance, I nodded, unsurprised. What had begun as an affair had evolved into an opportunistic business relationship, and once both aspects collapsed, there was likely nothing left between them. And the house? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Per the agreement, you have sole ownership. Rebecca has completed the removal of her personal belongings. The locks have been changed and the security codes reset. I had been staying in a downtown hotel during the settlement process, unable to face the emptiness of our home. Now, it was officially mine alone. The dream house I had designed, built, on the foundation of a marriage that had proved to be as carefully constructed a facade as its modern exterior. "What will you do now?" Victoria asked, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Focus on the Riverfront project," I replied automatically. "It's entering the construction phase, and after everything that's happened, I need it to be perfect." She nodded, understanding that work had become my refuge. "And personally?" I managed a small smile. "One step at a time. I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust anyone again, but I'm trying not to let Rebecca's betrayal define the rest of my life." As I left Victoria's office for the last time, the spring sunshine felt warmer somehow, as if the weather itself was acknowledging a new beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Team taking you out for drinks to celebrate Riverfront groundbreaking. No excuses. 6 p.m. at Hawthorne." I smiled, feeling a genuine flash of happiness for the first time in weeks. My colleagues had rallied around me during the worst crisis of my life. respecting my privacy while offering subtle support. Emily had been particularly invaluable, managing my schedule and fielding inquiries with discreet efficiency. That evening, as we toasted the beginning of construction on what would become my defining architectural achievement, I found myself seated next to Emily. The conversation flowed easily among the team, talk of construction timelines and material selections, mercifully free of any personal undercurrents. "You seem better," Emily observed quietly during a moment when the others were engaged in a debate about sustainable concrete options. "I am," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. "Or at least, I'm getting there." She nodded, her dark eyes warm with understanding. One blueprint at a time, I smiled at her architectural metaphor. Exactly. Tear down what doesn't work, keep the foundations solid, build something better. 6 months later, I stood on the observation platform overlooking the riverfront construction site. The project was proceeding ahead of schedule, its clean lines and innovative public spaces already taking recognizable form. James Harrison joined me, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "The board's impressed," he said, gesturing toward the rising structures. "There's already talk of making you managing partner when I retire next year." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. "Even after the security concerns with Rebecca?" "Especially after that," James replied. "The way you handled it, putting the firm's interests first, maintaining client confidence, managing the legal exposure. It showed leadership, Michael. The kind this firm needs going forward." Later that evening, I met Emily for dinner, no longer my assistant, but now the firm's newly promoted project manager for our sustainable design division. Our professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship, and recently, carefully, something more. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass to mine. As we clinked glasses, I felt the last shadows of Rebecca's betrayal finally lifting. The hidden clause in our post-nuptial agreement, the one she had ironically insisted upon years earlier, had been the key that unlocked my freedom from a marriage built on deception. Sometimes, I reflected, justice arrives through unexpected channels. What Rebecca had intended as my financial destruction had become the catalyst for rebuilding everything: my career, my home, my capacity for trust. As Emily smiled across the table, I realized that sometimes what looks like an ending is simply the foundation for something stronger, something real. The account she had drained wasn't just financial, it was emotional, the currency of trust and shared dreams. But unlike money, those resources could be replenished, invested more wisely the second time around. And this time, I would make sure the foundations were solid. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.